Hello and welcome to About the House. Every year, two parliamentarians, one from the government and one from the opposition, are selected to represent the Australian Federal Parliament at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. Member for Murray, Dr. Sharman Stone, recently spent 3 months at the UN advancing a range of issues, and her visit coincided with Australia's turn in chairing the Security Council. I spoke with Dr. Stone about her UN experience and the issues she tackled, including that of the inquiry into UN peacekeepers.
Well, peacekeeping in the UN is a bit like motherhood. We all think it's a wonderful thing and has been for generations, but the reality is that it's evolved into something a little different. These days, developing nations are getting a little concerned about putting in a lot of dollars to pay for the offers from developing countries of their troops to go to some of the hellholes of the global conflicts, like into Syria or perhaps some of the African nations, or even into Timor-Leste during their periods of difficulty some time ago. These troops are often not trained, they're not sent properly equipped, they certainly haven't got human rights background and training. And it's been found that too often there are complaints about the behaviour, the performance of these United Nations peacekeepers in places where they should have been taking an extraordinarily important and protective role. So Australia initiated the questions being asked, and Ban Ki-moon picked this up. There's now an expert panel that was formed late last year. Jose Ramos Horta is the person in charge of that panel. And they're going to be looking at the fundamental financial needs of maintaining such a security or a peacekeeping capacity when there is a problem, the training of these forces and their equipage, their management when they're in play. For example, now it's often a policing role that's needed in one of these sorts of global conflicts rather than actual military a military engagement. What happens is when the call goes out, who can supply some police? They simply change the badges on the uniforms of those that they have in their country. They get a higher per capita per diem for those, now so-called police. But there hasn't been the training, there hasn't been any experience before in the civilian role of policing. So it's important, this inquiry. We're not for a minute suggesting that there hasn't been extraordinarily good work done in the past with peacekeeping. My own son was in the Timor-Leste peacekeeping efforts as an Australian Army officer, but we've got to look at this hard, transparently, take the lids off, stare into the black box and say, how can we do this better? As we speak, we have more conflict globally than any other time in human history, which is extraordinary, but it's the case. But in the past, civilians were collateral damage in a conflict. They weren't targeted, they were the unintended consequence of whatever was happening between military contests. Today, particularly as we look at the conflicts with ISIL or Daesh, we look at the African conflicts with people like Boko Haram. Women and girls are in fact an instrument of how to defeat the enemy. You kidnap women and girls, you maltreat them, you make them sex slaves, you take away certainly any opportunity to be educated and so on. They become major instruments of aggression and winning a conflict. So Australia again was very upfront saying this is a new development, a tragic and horrific new development of human conflict on our globe. Let's make sure it is really up there and is being addressed, because the needs of women to be protected as they perhaps come into a war zone is greater than ever before. We've got to understand what is happening and why the ideology of some of these new offenders, terrorists, military regimes is different to what a lot of experience before, how to prepare and protect women in these circumstances.
To find out more about the United Nations General Assembly and Australia's role within it, see the website.